the Single Mom Success Podcast, Episode 7. Heather Wells and the Single Mom blog present Single Mom Success, the place for single moms to find support, inspiration, and the path to their own success. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Single Mom Success Podcast. I hope you all are doing fabulously. And I actually wanted to jump into today's topic because it's one that is very, very important to me, something that has made a significant difference in my life, my success, and just kind of how I feel in general. And it's kind of interesting because this was on my list of topics that I wanted to do a podcast about. And it's funny because it just sort of popped into my Facebook feed today, and it was just kind of fate. I thought, well, since it's there and it's something that I had been thinking of doing a podcast about, why don't I just do it? Apparently, the universe is speaking to me today. So, one of the things that I have found that has become just instrumental to my success, not just as a single mom, but just in general. I think this is a good suggestion or, policy for everyone, just to feel better about yourself, feel better about your day, feel better about just in general, everything. And that is to get rid of the toxic people that are in your life, or develop ways to handle toxic people. And again, this came up in my feed, and it's actually a blog post that was done in entrepreneur.com. It was an article, 12 Ways Successful People Handle Toxic People. And so, it, like I said, it was just sort of kismet that it fell into my lap. And if you can, I suggest that you go read it, and I'll put a link to it in the post. But it definitely covers a lot of things that I found were just super helpful in just handling people who are toxic. And some people I actually just had to get rid of completely. It's unfortunate. And you never like burning bridges. You never like, cutting ties, especially if it's with people that you've been friends with for a really long time, or, that played a really large part in your life. It's very difficult to do. But there are just those people in life who are very toxic for you, who are very emotionally draining, who are what I call emotional vampires. They're those people that when you're around them, it feels like they sort of suck the life out of you. And they are the people who are constantly complaining, who never have anything positive to say, who are always angry or very bitter, and just don't seem to have any sort of a positive side to them. They're very, very difficult to be around. And if you have anybody like this in your life, you'll notice when you're around them, the way you feel is different. You feel differently when you're with them. I had a friend who was a really good friend for a really long period of time. And, she had some very, unfortunate things happen in her life. And it was something like she just couldn't quite recover from. And she spent a good part of her time very upset, very unhappy, moping about her situation, but never really appearing to want to do anything about it, or, stating that she wanted to do something about it, but then never actually took the initiative to do anything about it. So, if you've ever been around one of those people that just complains and complains and complains and complains, and you try and be the supportive friend, and you try and be helpful, and you're like, well, what about this, or what about that? Have you tried this? Have you, you offer suggestions, maybe you try to be that positive influence to try and, help them get over the hump, or, whatever it is that they've got going on. And you do all of that, and you put a lot of energy into being that supportive and helpful friend. And then you just watch them, completely, still not do anything to change your situation, still not do anything to make things better, still not do anything to, bring about any type of change for themselves. And yet they still come around complaining, oh, poor me, or, oh, this sucks, or, life is bad. And, but you sit there and you're like, we just, this is how I felt. I was like, we just had this conversation. We literally just talked about this, a week ago, 2 days ago, 5 hours ago. Like, what's going on here? I don't understand how you are so unhappy, but you're not willing to do anything to change it. You're not willing to make things better for yourself. And so those are the people that I've had to sort of step away from, because I look at it, I'm like, I've got 3 children that I'm trying to raise into successful, happy people, and I just don't have the energy to try and help you be a successful, happy person. When you're not willing to do it, like, I can't do it for you, and it's so draining to be around somebody who is completely negative on a regular basis. And so dealing with that toxicity, as far as, just not being, I don't know, I guess I can't really explain it. It's so difficult for me to understand. I mean, I've had my moments where I've been really down in the dumps and I've been really upset or unhappy with the way my situation was, but it was never something where I sat there repeatedly, day in, day out, just completely miserable about it, without being willing to do anything to improve my situation, right? So it was really hard for me to understand. It's really hard for me to deal with. And it was one of those things where every time this person would come around, by the time they left, it was just like, ugh. Like, I felt like I wanted to take a nap because I was just so drained being around somebody who was just so, like, miserable or unhappy or toxic. And then there's those that they are the person who bring out the worst in you every single time. My ex is, when we were together, it was one of them. He was one of those people that, just brought out the worst in me. And, obviously I have to be responsible for my actions and the way I behaved and the things that I did and said. But he was one of those people, sorry, not enough coffee. He was one of those people that just pushed my buttons. Like, he went out of his way a lot of times to try and figure out what it was that would set me off, that would push my buttons and start a fight. Even if it was to accuse me of being the one who pushed buttons to start a fight type of thing. And, we didn't bring out the best in each other, and we were toxic for each other. And so, I really, really like this article. And again, I'm going to put the link for the article in the post, because it really stresses several points that were very critical for me in being able to manage it. And so I think it's like the 12 ways successful people handle toxic people. And the first one is they set limits, especially with complainers. Complainers and negative people are bad news because they wallow in their problems and fail to focus on their solutions. So exactly like I was talking about my friend, they focus only on their problems, but do not focus on solutions. They don't want anybody to help them. They just want to, wallow in their little pity party and please feel bad for me and please do for me and please. They say it in the article, you don't want to call them out on it because you don't want to seem as rude, but it does get to a point where you've got to be like, look, and I had to tell this friend that, I said, I know I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. I've offered suggestions. I've offered support, but it just seems that you don't want to do what needs to be done to improve your situation. And I can't keep going through this with you because it's taking all my energy and it's not okay. And so the article states, set limits, distance yourself when necessary. And think of it, if the complainer were smoking and you didn't smoke, would you sit there all afternoon inhaling secondhand smoke? Which is very true. I mean, if what's going on with them is literally bringing you down, why would you sit there and continue to spend significant amounts of time with them, letting them, if you're not able to bring them up, why would you sit there and allow them to bring you down, right? I mean, in all honesty, if you want to be a supportive friend, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if they're one of those people that no matter what you do, their mood is not going to improve or their situation is not going to improve because they don't want to take the actions necessary to do it, then why would you continue to sit there and let them bring you down and make you feel worse, right? So, the next one is, they put in here is don't die in the fight. People know that it's important to live to fight another day. So, sometimes, like I said before, you just gotta be able to, choose your battles wisely and walk away when you need to, and, fight when you need to. And this one is good with relationships and things like that. If something's going on and you are not able to, if you're in an argument where you're not going to win, or you feel like you've just been, beating your head up against a wall, why would you stand there and continue to beat your head against the wall? So sometimes you got to pick and choose your battles and know when it's time to just walk away, to be able to come back to it another day, or just hopefully, find some other alternative situation. But, don't keep beating your head against a wall. It gives you a headache. To be honest, there's no reason to do that. The next one that they put is to rise above. They rise above. It says toxic people drive you crazy because their behavior is so irrational. And yes, it does. It totally, I would go insane dealing with some people because I'm sitting there going, I do not understand why you don't just do this one thing. If you do this one thing, it will get better. If you can just do this one thing. And it does. It really just, it would drive me crazy. And I would get so emotionally attached to it that I would go nuts. And be so frustrated and so angry, literally angry. And this is somebody else's life. This is somebody else's life. It's not my life. I was angry and frustrated because that person wasn't doing the one thing I knew, or, the one or two things that I knew if they just did would make life better for them. And I was so angry, like it was my own problem. And it wasn't. It wasn't my problem. And I couldn't get past that. It was so frustrating to me. And so being able to kind of take that step back and remove yourself, right, is and the article says, distance yourself from them emotionally and approach your interactions like they're a science project, right? You're just observing it. You're not living it, right? But I was so sucked in to what was going on. I allowed myself to start really emotionally becoming involved in what was going on with them, that it made no sense. Looking back at it now, I can sit here and go, my God, I was so angry and so frustrated, and it wasn't even my life. It wasn't my problem. It wasn't my issue, but I was just as upset as if it was something that was happening to me. And and for some people, it's really hard not to do that because you're very, intuitive, you're very emotive. And, and I understand there's a lot of people like that who are very, very, emotionally in tune with other people and very sensitive to that. So it is extremely hard for people like that to distance themselves. They get very emotionally involved in the problems of their friends and the problems of others. The problem with that is that it's draining. It's not as if I have no problems of my own, and so I have the strength and the inner strength and ability to take on the problems of 3 and 4 or 5 other people who are my friends, to where it will emotionally drain me to deal with their problems. I have my own stuff to deal with as well. And if I'm allowing myself to get that emotionally involved with what everybody else is going on, I'm not putting enough attention to what's going on with me. And I got to a point with myself where I had to step away from the friends that were causing me the problems and the drama. And, when they didn't understand, they're like, well, I don't know why you're not talking to me anymore. And I don't know why and then I had to kind of explain, I'm like, I have to be able to focus on me. And, you've got whatever problems going on that you've got going on. I can't help you with those. I've tried to offer suggestion. I've tried to offer support, and it's become emotionally draining for me to be involved in your problems, and I can't do that anymore. I have to focus on myself and my kids and take care of of us emotionally. I mean, I'm responsible for the emotional well-being of 3 children, right? Like, that's draining enough. And those are the people that I should be responsible for. Those are the people that I should be able to, if they're hurt or they're having problems, those are the people who should get my emotional energy, not the grown adults in my life who should be able to take care of themselves, right? So definitely being able to kind of rise above and step away and like emotionally distance yourself is super important, because that toxicity and that just that it, and again, I say toxicity, but because it sounds like a bad thing, but it's very toxic for you emotionally to take on other people's emotional problems like they were your own, right? Which kind of leads to the fourth point that they make, is to stay aware of your emotions. Again, making an emotional distance and being aware. They say you can't stop someone from pushing your buttons if you don't recognize when it's happening, right? So kind of be aware, because anybody who's built their life or has a lifestyle where they are this sort of emotional vampire, or this person who relies on other people feeling sorry for them, like they feed off of it, right? Or relies on people trying to figure out the solutions for them because they just don't want to do it themselves. Whatever the issue is, there are people, and they're so good at it, that they will literally push your buttons. And it kind of reminds me of a story when my grandmother was caring for her elderly aunt, and she was my Aunt Joy, and she was this little bitty lady she always wore hats, and she was the sweetest lady. Like, I loved her and adored her all my life. But as she got older, she got kind of snarky and a little bit difficult, let's say. And my grandmother was helping to care for her, and she would go and pick her up and take her places and do things, and she would come home and I would see her, and she would just be so drained and so unhappy. And I kept asking her, I said, what is going on? And I'm thinking to myself, little Aunt Joy, who I love and adore and who is a sweet lady, for all intents and purposes, I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, why does this little lady, she's like, she couldn't have weighed 80 pounds soaking wet. She was dinky. How is she draining you so much that when you come home, you look like you need a 3-hour nap? Like, what's going on? And she said, she goes, ever since she's gotten older and has required care, she's just become nasty. She's just mean. She says things to make me feel bad and to hurt my feelings. So my Aunt Joy, this little bitty lady, she had quite literally figured out what my grandmother's buttons were and would push them on a regular basis. And whether it be a guilt trip of, oh, well, I'll just take the bus and figure out a way to do it. If she called for a ride and my grandmother said, I can't take you right now, we'll have to go tomorrow. Then I'll just take the bus. It's okay. You don't have to worry about me. I'm sure that I'll be fine, even though it's really hard for me to walk to the bus stop. And, so she would kind of guilt my grandmother into changing her plans to go and pick her up and take her. And then when she was with her, she was like, well, you would be so pretty if you didn't have that little bit of extra weight on you. So it was sort of like that compliment, insult hidden in a compliment type of thing. So she was really good at that. So my grandmother would just tell me these stories about what was going on, and I'm thinking to myself, man, Aunt Joy just she got real nasty toward the end. And I think it was because she didn't like the fact that she couldn't care for herself anymore. And it's definitely a matter of pride. So it was real easy for her to, reach out and lash out at my grandmother. But, and it ended up being that I would go with her towards the end when she went to go see my Aunt Joy. I said, well, you take me with you next time, because I guarantee you she won't behave that way in front of me, because she doesn't want anybody else to know she's being snarky. And sure enough, she was good as gold. She was good as gold when my grandmother took me with her. So it kind of became a routine. But I talked to my grandmother and I said, just don't let her push your buttons. Don't let her make you feel bad. But you have to stay aware of your emotions, because anybody who's really good at what they do, they know what things to say and what buttons to push. And because they know you're a good person, or they know that you want to help, they will deliberately, put it in a way, or say it in a way, or, set the stage in a way where it almost makes it impossible for you to say no. Like it's impossible for you to not engage, right? So, if they, and they say here, in the article, if a mentally unstable person approaches you on the street and tells you he's John F. Kennedy, you're unlikely to set him straight. You're not going to engage with him to try and convince him that he's not John F. Kennedy, right? You're just going to kind of go, okay, and walk away and nod and smile. And just kind of keep going. So think of it like that. If think of them like they're a crazy person. If they're saying all these things, just go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Don't engage, And I have to do this a lot with my son as well. My son with the developmental delays, he has issues where when he gets really upset or angry about something, he really wants to fight. Like, he really wants to argue. And it almost becomes, and it a lot of times becomes, not about the issue that he has, it's about the fight, right? He wants that engagement. He wants me to engage with him. And so I have to stop and remember that if I engage with him in this and I argue with him, it's just going to get worse, and it's going to get worse because that's what he wants. He wants that conflict. He doesn't, it's really not even necessarily about the topic he's upset about. He wants the conflict. And so, and here's the funny part is if I won't argue with him about whatever that topic is, he'll change the subject to try and find something that will piss me off enough to actually engage with him. Right? And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that you've been involved with that maybe have done the same thing. Like, you won't fight with them about that issue, so they bring up something else that they know will push your buttons just to get you to engage, right? And you just have to walk away. Just walk away. Just be like, you know what? I'm not having this conversation with you, and just go. I do that with my son all the time. I'm like, I'm not discussing this with you. I'm in a good mood today, and I'd like to stay that way. So when you're done with your little tirade, you can come talk to me like a big kid, and we'll discuss it then, right? And about 20 minutes later, he's like, okay, Mom, I'm calmed down. Let's talk, and it works out better. So definitely be aware of your emotions and know what things are pushing your buttons and what are sensitive topics for you, because those are the things that people are going to use to sort of try and nudge you and bring them back. They're going to try and bring you back in. No matter how many times you try and get out, they're going to try and bring you back in. So always be aware of that. And the next thing is establishing boundaries, right? And that kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. It's kind of funny how one of these flows right into the next. It's definitely something that, because, and it says here, establishing boundaries is a place where people sell themselves short because they feel like if they work or live with someone, they have no way to control the chaos. And that's actually, not true. Once you realize that you need to be able to sort of distance yourself and disconnect from it, it will give you the ability to sort of set up those boundaries, just like I talked about, where I talk to my son and say, look, you and I, we can't have a serious conversation when you're angry because you just want to fight. So when you can calm down, then you can come and talk to me, right? He tries to drag me in, and I set up that boundary of, this is the only way you and I are going to discuss this, right? So, you just gotta, and like it says in the article, stick to your guns, keep those boundaries in place. When they try and kind of push in on them, which they will, you gotta stick to it. If it's a coworker, it's like, I cannot talk to you about a personal problem while we're at work, right? And just keep that boundary. I really don't feel comfortable getting into personal issues while at work. Whatever the boundary is that you set, you stick to it, right? It's like, if they're trying to talk to you while you're supposed to be working, right? Just say, I'm sorry, we can't talk about this right now. If they're talking to you about their husband who's cheating on them and you're getting sucked in, just be, I'm sorry, but I really don't feel comfortable talking about your marriage in the workplace, or whatever the case may be. it's really up to you how you're going to set those boundaries up. But once you do, you guys just got to stick to it, because people they'll try and suck you in. They really will. And one of my favorite ones is this one. It's number 6, of, the best way successful people, deal with toxic people. They don't let anyone limit their joy. When your sense of pleasure and satisfaction are derived from the opinions of other people, you are no longer the master of your own happiness. And I love that line. The guy who wrote this is wonderful. His name is Travis Bradberry. I love this, okay? And I'll read it again because it's a really, really good line. When your sense of pleasure and satisfaction are derived from the opinions of other people, you are no longer the master of your own happiness, which is so true. I mean, think about it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of toxic people have the problems that they have, if you truly think about it. Because they are latching their happiness onto something or someone else, right? And think about all of the really, successful people and the real, amazing people. Think of all the famous people and the successful people that you can kind of think of. And honestly think to yourself, do they really care what anyone thinks of them? Like, they've made their life what it is just simply because they feel good about themselves, who they are, where they're going, what they're doing, right? And, obviously, like he says in the article, it's impossible to turn off your reactions to what others think of you. You don't compare yourself to other people. You take people's opinions with a grain of salt. I mean, I love this part of his article. It's so amazing. Seriously, when I was with my ex, I felt bad about myself because I didn't know where I stood with him. My sense of who I was became latched onto the way he treated me and the way our relationship was going, right? I started feeling like the reason that our relationship was the way it was because I was doing something wrong, or the person that I wasn't enough, or I needed to be different, right? And so I adjusted, I changed, I kind of twisted myself into an emotional pretzel to try and make it work. And in the end, we split up, and after, the initial breakup and the, upset and being, the crying and the anger and all those fun little emotions that you go through when you break up with someone. But then there was the clarity, right? The looking back and going, holy crap, what was I doing? What did I do? Right? I've spent the last almost 7 years of my life single, completely celibate, just completely done. Just spent 7 years of my life because I came out of that relationship with my ex and I felt like I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I had to get back to me. I had to get back to the person that I was. I had to get back to a stronger foundation of myself because it was imperative for my own health, but also to be a good mom to my kids, right? To be a good parent. I needed to be able to have a solid idea of myself and who I was and what I wanted and that. And it was really important, really important. And so now I can't imagine, and that's, I think back and I think to myself of, my daughter says stuff like, I wish you and Daddy were still together. And I look at it and go, God, not a chance in hell. Not a chance in hell. Because there is no way I want to take on that drama again. There is no way that I want to be with somebody who limits my joy. Who changes my opinion of myself or makes me feel like I have to change who I am in order to be with them, right? That's not healthy. It's not healthy for anybody, right? So the same goes with friends, right? Anybody, who makes you feel like you are not good enough, or, it's really amazing how people like I said, the emotional vampires, they suck the life right out of you. They suck the joy out of you. And those are the people to really stay away from, because, if they can't figure it out, if they can't get that happiness from themselves, no amount of what you do is going to help, right? They're going to try and steal your joy and your happiness and your, what you have, because what you have is what they want, right? They are lacking something. That's why they're unhappy. That's why they're toxic, right? And so they are going to try and suck it out of you because you have it. That's why they latched you, right? So that's definitely a huge one. And like I said, I love that line that he typed. Toxic people, or successful people rather, instead of toxic, the way that they avoid toxic people is, number 7, they don't focus on problems, they focus on solutions, which is very true. I mean, anybody who's going to be successful, because everybody runs into problems. Everybody runs into issues. Everybody has crap that happens, negativity, stress, like problems at work, problems at home, bad things happen, But if you focus on the solution, not the problem, right? You focus on, okay, this happened, it sucks, I processed it, now what do I need to do about it? How can I make this better? What's my next step? Right? And the people who are going to be toxic in your lives are the ones that will wallow. They will wallow in whatever misery came their way. My ex left me, my husband left me, my ex cheated on me, or I lost my job, or oh this, or oh that, and they're very, very unhappy, but they're focusing on that, the misery, instead of the solution that would help them get out of it, right? And that's key. That's huge. It's a huge thing, right? It's a huge thing to be able to look at your situation and go, okay, this really sucks, but what am I going to do about it? How am I going to fix it? How am I going to improve it, right? That's huge. Being able to do that is so important. The next one is they don't forget. Emotionally intelligent people are quick to forgive, but that doesn't mean they forget. Forgive, yes, because, forgiveness is so important, because you don't want to just let stuff eat at you. You've got to be able to forgive people. And I know I say that, and it's something that I work on every single day. It's not easy. Totally not easy. Like I said, in one of my past podcasts, my boys' father, I still haven't forgiven him. It's a very difficult thing to forgive, especially when I'm faced every single day with the consequences of his actions. Watching my son struggle, both of my children struggle, because they have a brain injury that they wouldn't have had their father not done what he did. And that's a huge, huge, hard thing to forgive. And I'm still working on it. It's, I'm human. I'm not perfect. And so forgiveness is a hard one to come by for that. But, I forgive my ex, for the hurt that he caused. I forgive him for, a lot of the things that went on. That doesn't mean I forget. I haven't forgotten, forgiving somebody for hurting you is different than acting like it never happened and giving them a chance to do it again. If somebody, it doesn't, just because you forgive them doesn't mean that you'll necessarily give them another chance. It's totally up to you, but, don't let it affect you. Like, don't let it says here, successful people are unwilling to be bogged down unnecessarily by others' mistakes. So they let them go and are assertive in protecting themselves from future harm, right? I let it go. You made a mistake. People make mistakes, but I'm going to be wary in the future. You may not trust them as much as you used to. That type of thing. Squashing negative self-talk. Huge. It's so important to be really positive about yourself. And we talked about this in the Loving Yourself podcast. How important is it to love yourself and to think highly of yourself? You can't expect other people to think highly of you if you don't think highly of you. If you don't take pride in who you are, then why should anyone else, right? If you are positive about who you are, you can't beat yourself down. If you beat yourself down, you're just doing somebody else's job for them. Like, there are going to be people in this world who are going to try and beat you down, who are going to try to talk down to you. Why in the world would you do that to yourself? Right? There's a great Dove commercial, I think it's Dove, where they asked women to write down what they think about themselves. Like, oh, I'm too fat, or I'll never get a man, or, my hair looks really mousy, or blah, blah, blah. And they ended up taking these women to like a cafe, and they had some actors talk to each other the way that these women were talking to themselves, and they listened to it and they were just shocked. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe that lady is saying that to that other person. Like, how could she talk to her like that? It's so rude. But it was what they were saying to themselves. Right? So why would you wouldn't let anybody else talk to you like that. Why would you talk to yourself that way? Right? So totally squash negative talk, because, like the article says, there's nothing wrong with feeling bad about how someone is treating you, but your self-talk can intensify the negativity that they send you, or, it can help you move past it. Right? So if somebody says to you, God, you look really fat in those pants, you could say, you know what? I think I look good in these pants, right? I think I look fine in these pants. Why would I let their opinion of me change my opinion of me, right? And that's why it's so important to be able to, if you have toxic people in your life, being able to deal with those toxic people. If you feel good about you and you're not talking negatively about you, if those toxic people start talking negatively about you, then you don't have to worry about it, because you don't feel it. It doesn't bother you, right? They also talk about, limiting caffeine and getting sleep. The caffeine I really can't do right now. I'm trying to limit it, but obviously getting a good night's sleep makes you more positive, makes you creative, more proactive. So, having a good night's sleep, if you have to deal with a toxic person, if you have only 2 hours of sleep under your belt or 4, you're not going to deal with them as well as you would if you had 8 hours. I don't deal with my children as well when I've only had 4 hours of sleep as opposed to 8 hours of sleep. So toxic people is even worse. So always make sure you get enough sleep. And then the last one they put here is they use their support system. It says it's tempting yet entirely ineffective to attempt tackling everything by yourself. To deal with toxic people, you need to recognize the weakness in your approach to them. So if you know that you are not capable of vocalizing to someone that you need time or space, if you need to have that buddy come with you and say, hey, look, man, and they could be your wingman, right? Just be, wow, you are very, negative, or why are you expecting her to deal with your problems? Why aren't you dealing with this, right? Maybe having that support with you to just help, or even just be there as an emotional support for you, or, just somebody to talk to about the problems that you're having with this toxic person. Just say, look, I've got this friend, and this is the way she is, and it drains me. Sometimes being able to have that support to say, okay, look, then why are you letting them? The next time they say this, try this. Get that support that you need to help deal with the toxic people in your life. If, because sometimes you can't just get rid of them. It's not like, sometimes it's your family. It's really, really important to be able to have that support system. And if, for some people it is their family, for some people they need the support system to help them with their family, right? So everybody's situation is different. But what is very key and what is very crucial and very important, and the biggest takeaway from this podcast today is, please, 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 if you have toxic people in your life or those types of toxic relationships, use these steps to help manage it. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses and run. Sometimes you have to be able to emotionally distance yourself from them. And that doesn't mean that you're not their friend, or that you don't love them or you don't care for them. It's just whatever they've got going on or the way that they're dealing with their life, you can't be the person that fixes it for them. You can't be the person who is emotionally attached to it because it isn't your life, it's theirs. And you have your own life and your own emotions and your own struggles that you have to deal with, and to take on the struggles of someone else who needs to be able to handle them themselves is doing you a disservice, but it's also doing them a disservice. If they're not going to ever be able to take on these problems, if somebody is always doing it for them, they are never going to realize what they need to change in their lives in order to be successful. If you are always picking up the slack for them, or if you are always that person who's like, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry. Like, if you give credit to whatever they're doing and you enforce that behavior by not standing up to it or changing the way that you deal with it, they're never going to change because there's no reason for them to, right? So sort of a tough love thing as well on that part. So I hope that you found this helpful. Again, please go take a look at this article. It definitely goes, into a little more depth than some of the talking points. I loved it. I think it's a very, very good article, and I will post the link for it again at the bottom. If you like this article, I would love to hear a comment below. Please feel free and share any times that you've had to deal with a toxic person, or if you're currently dealing with a toxic person, my mother-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law, or my parents, or my friend. We definitely would love to hear your stories and how you plan on taking on that toxicity and sort of stepping away from it and being able to be successful in dealing with these types of situations. And again, if you like this podcast, please do subscribe. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to the Single Mom Podcast, the place to go for support, encouragement, and maybe a few laughs along the way. Please also make sure you head on over to the Single Mom blog for more great stuff for single moms. We have resources, free things to print out, great articles. Can't wait to see you there. Be sure to leave feedback and comments because we love hearing from other single moms. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to subscribe.